the 5-year anniversary of the day I almost died. I lived, bitches. So on this day, I'd like to do a combination PSA and story time, because not only was my medical condition something that, like, a lot more people should be aware of, it's also how I got diagnosed with ADHD, and here we are now. It has no bearing on the story, but it is a flex, so I'm going to include it. 5 years ago, I was the entertainment director at the Georgia Renaissance Festival, and I woke up to go to work, and I had what I thought were cramps. Well, I have an IUD, and so I tend to get very bad cramps. So I was kind of like, power through, because that's what we do, and I went to work. Over the course of the day, I started feeling crappier and crappier, and so finally I sort of acquiesced to the fact that, like, I really needed to go home. So I went to my boss, said, hey man, I'm not feeling good, and he was like, verily, milady. He didn't say that. He was like, okay, fine, I feel better, and I left. So I went home, and I kept feeling worse and worse and worse, but now I felt like I had the flu. I was freezing cold. Remember laying on my bedroom floor thinking about how these were the worst cramps that I'd ever had in my whole life, and like, maybe I should go to urgent care, but I didn't want to because I didn't want to, like, be a bother. I didn't want to be the person who showed up going like, I have cramps. So I put it off. Finally, a couple of hours later, I'm like, I can't take this anymore. I'm just gonna go to urgent care. And it's a really good thing I did, because otherwise I probably would have died. I get to the urgent care, they take my temperature, and they're like, oh, that's weird. The thermometer isn't working. Take my temperature with another thermometer, and they're like, that's so weird. 2 of these thermometers are broken. Third time, they're like, maybe your body temperature just is 93 degrees. And at that point, I passed out on the floor. I wake up in the ambulance that is driving me across the parking lot to the hospital, because the urgent care is in the parking lot of the hospital. I thought that part was embarrassing. I was like, I could have just walked, but I probably couldn't have. At this point, I'm not exactly a priority patient. I'm like, I have a tummy ache. And so, you know, they're working to figure out what's wrong with me. And then I get called in for an ultrasound. And this part is funny. I am in so much pain at this point. Like, I am in the most pain that I've ever been in my entire life, but I'm me, so I'm making jokes, right? Like, I live with chronic pain. I am used to being uncomfortable, and so one of the things that I think happened was, like, nobody really took it seriously, because I was just like, I feel like I want to die. So I get in for the ultrasound, and the ultrasound technician is pissed because she's supposed to be off, and she needs to take her kid to a birthday party, but, like, they're like, please just do this, like, last one before she leaves, and so she's, like, being all huffy, right? She's like, also my glasses are broken, that's fine. What I remember from this is I'm, like, laying on the table, right? And she's got the stick, and she's doing this thing, and she's like, all huffy, birthday party, whatever. And then she stops, and she freezes, and she goes, I'll be back in just a moment. And she, like, backs out of the room, and then all I hear are, like, panicked running footfalls down the hallway, and there's like a pause, and then a group of panicked running footfalls coming towards the room. And that was when I found out that I did not have a tummy ache, I did not have cramps, I had an ovarian torsion. Now, an ovarian torsion happens when your ovary basically twists around on itself and the blood is cut off to your ovary, and then it fucking dies. This isn't an important thing for ovary havers. A lot of people will be like, oh my god, ovarian torsions are so rare. No, they're the 5th most common gynecological emergency. That's an incredibly hard sentence to say. It happened to about 6 of every 100,000 women, and I was one of those lucky 6 that day. They finally figured out that I'm having an ovarian torsion, and they're like, we have to take you in for emergency surgery immediately. And I'm like, cool. Also, as a sidebar to a sidebar, it was my husband's first day of work at a new job, and I didn't want to stress him out, so I, like, didn't call him for, like, way too long, and he still makes fun of me for that to this day. Anyway, so they take me into emergency surgery, which is, frank, it's not that bad. It's laparoscopic, like, it's not dramatic or anything. They take me in, they remove the dead ovary that has since sent me into septic shock. That's why I was feeling so terrible and I was so cold. And I woke up and I, like, instantly felt better. Like, that was the thing that I really remember. I went into surgery feeling like I was going to die. I woke up being like, meh. A couple of weeks go by, I'm healing up just fine, and I go to the doctor for a follow-up appointment, and she's like, hey, couple of things. One, that means that your body is currently going through a massive hormone fluctuation, and so shit might be a little bit rough for a while. And I was like, okay, it'll be fine. It was not fine. Second thing is she's like, and also, you're probably gonna hit menopause like way earlier than most other people your age. And I was like, okay, fine. It is not fine. So a couple of weeks go by, and at this point, probably a lot of you have heard this part of the story, but I started noticing all of these weird mental symptoms. I couldn't remember stuff. I couldn't focus on stuff. I couldn't pay attention. I was struggling with executive dysfunction. I literally thought I had early onset dementia. Luckily for me, I had a friend who was like, I don't think that is early onset dementia. I think you've always had ADHD and now you're just really feeling it for some reason. And it turns out that he was right. I also do want to admit that at this point of the story, I did get really lucky because I found a psychologist who just got me. Like, she was a burnt out gifted kid with ADHD and depression and anxiety. I'm a burnt out gifted kid with depression and anxiety and ADHD. And so it was like one of those things where she was like, oh, you're one of those. That was, fun fact, the day before my birthday. Happy birthday, you have ADHD now. I thought that was really weird. I was like, how does having an ovary remove make it so that all of a sudden the ADHD that I've been sort of powering through is now unmanageable? And I didn't, nobody had an answer. Nobody had an answer. And so I went online and I started doing a bunch of research and I found a study about ADHD and hormones. It turns out that, especially if you are in possession of ovaries, that of course ADHD is impacted by your hormones because your hormones help to regulate things like attention and emotional regulation. And so when those hormones are fluctuating, so too are the severity and prevalence of your ADHD symptoms. And I got mad and I started making content about ADHD and like my experience. And now 250 some million people later, here we are. Thanks for being here. Also had just moved, and so like that was like the worst year of my life. It was so awful. Anyway, here are some important things for you to know about ovarian torsions. One, symptoms include things like severe abdominal pain, for some people chills, vomiting, nausea, and so if you suspect that you have an ovarian torsion, it's really important to get treated right away because if the blood is cut off for too long, your ovary will die and they will have to surgically remove it and you will be left with one Han Solo ovary like myself. 2, this can also happen testicularly. In fact, it's really common in little kids for them to be like, my junk hurts. And then surprise, it was a testicular torsion. It happens a lot, especially if you play sports. One of the biggest causes of ovarian torsions, and this was the case for me, is ovarian cysts. When they get too big, they can weight down the ovary and cause it to sort of flip around. Also the case for me, sometimes what can happen is the ovary will twist and then untwist and then twist back and then twist. So it can happen for like several weeks, like off and on, which happened to me. I went to the hospital twice, both times for the same sort of pain symptoms. But both times I just figured, oh, I'm just having like a rough period situation. But this was the one that like it never stopped. And so that was the reason why I was like, okay, I should probably go talk. This is also a moment where I need to stress the importance of self-advocacy when it comes to medical professionals. Medical professionals are people, and many of them are kind and generous and here to help, but many of them are struggle with that, is how I will say that nicely. For me, in particular, when I went in to get my ovary looked at before I lost it, I was told that the cyst that I had actually disappeared. They figured that the reason why I had been in pain was because the cyst had sort of popped and I was good to go. What had actually happened was that the cyst had gotten so large that it had consumed my entire ovary and was blocking the view. They were just straight up wrong about what was going on, and because of that, I almost died. This is also where I would say that if you are a person with ADHD, I would take some time to create a plan for what happens if you have a medical emergency. In my case, I really struggle with I don't want to be a bother. And so that meant that I literally didn't call my husband until I was about to go into emergency surgery because I didn't want to bother him on his first day of work. Have a plan with your family, have a phone tree or like a text chain set up where, you know, if you're in the hospital, somebody can text somebody, so like the people that need to know can get informed. Lastly, I think for me, it's important to stress that any major life change or life event can exacerbate symptoms of ADHD, especially in terms of a new or changing disability or chronic pain or chronic illness. It's going to affect your ADHD. I don't know what's going on with my hand, but it won't stop shaking. So anyway, that's my story. That's the time I almost died. Happy 5-year anniversary to all of us, because without that experience, I wouldn't be here. So thanks for sticking around, and have a good day, I guess. Don't die out there. All right.